Welcome, everyone, to the Credible Nerds podcast. My name is Justin, and I'm here with my fellow vampire killer, Jordan.
Hello.
And we are here to talk about the next book in our Stephen King series reread, Salem's Lot. And if you haven't checked out our previous reviews, you can do that on our YouTube channel. Just subscribe to the channel and like the video to help us out. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps us out a lot. So we've previously reviewed Carrie, Firestarter, and the dog book, Cujo. That's what it is. So, yeah. And I thought we had some pretty good conversations there. So check those out. Let us know what you think. But yeah, Salem's Lot, typical vampire story. I've recently read it for the first time, and Jordan's read it many times. So we'll have some good conversations about how this book goes. It's pretty straightforward. It does start off with a, I guess it's not necessarily a flashback because it's present time, and the main story is the flashback, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I was a little confused at this prologue because it doesn't really give names, I don't think, and it's just the boy and the man.
The boy and the man, yep.
Mm-hmm. And they're running from something, so you get this idea like, oh, something bad happened, and this kind of mentioned that this town was destroyed, or the people of the town were destroyed and killed, and so you kind of sets up this mood like, oh, what happened? What's going on here? And so I didn't know this book. I knew it was about vampires, but I didn't know much of the backstory. So I was pretty intrigued, but also confused at the same time, which I guess is a good thing because you're going to keep reading, kind of figure it out. So as far as this prologue goes, Jordan, do you remember the first time you read it? And if you don't, or either way, if you do or don't, when you read it again, knowing the story, how it all plays out is a good setup for this story.
Yeah, I do like the, impending kind of doom setup, like, okay, now you know this has happened. Mm-hmm. And as you're reading it, you kind of get a sense, okay, you've got a man, you got a boy. It's pretty, the boy is not so quick to figure out. You have the prologue with the man, and then it's like chapter 1 is Ben Mears, and you're like, okay, that's probably the man, right?
It took me a while to figure that out.
And so you're okay, so you're kind of following that, so you got that sense, and so and then a little while it's, then you've got these other kids that are then brought in. You're like, okay, here's how it's going to play out. But then with that, you do know, like, okay, it's not going to go well for all these people that he's coming into, because a lot of the book too that I really like is the town itself, because that Jerusalem's Lot, which is the full name of the town, not Salem's Lot, but Jerusalem's Lot, is kind of a character in and of itself.
Yeah.
So that's also I do like that. There's big chunks of the book where it's he's broken off, so you have chapters of Ben and chapters of this person, and then you have just the other citizens of the...
Yeah, it kind of gives a summary of what's going on in that snapshot of time.
Yep.
And the first one I'd read, I didn't like it. I was like, oh, this is dumb. I want to get back to the main story. But then it kind of revealed, as I got towards the end of that snapshot of the citizens and everything, I was like, okay, yeah, that was good. And then from then on, I was fine with it. I was like, okay, this is because you can't, there's so many people in the town, so much stuff happens, you can't, have a chapter or point of view for every one of them.
Yeah.
So it was a good way to kind of show what's going on elsewhere. So I like that.
And the thing that I really enjoy with, and you get it with, I can't say with a lot of different vampire books. I'm pretty limited in terms of novels of vampire books. But with most, you get the, patient zero, if you will. The vampire comes into the town and then slowly, is picking off people one by one. And so that's where the town chapters really, the first one, nothing happens, right? It's, you got kids working on a farm, and you've got a real estate guy, and you've got all these different just people that as you read it through, I remember like the last time I read it, maybe a year or so ago, but you're like, okay, I know this person, I know what happens to him. So yes, this is interesting setting this up, because he kind of, like, everyone happens for a reason. So
yeah, and it does kind of give you the sense that there's a lot of bad people in this town, right? A lot of cheaters, liars, stealers, adulterers, child abusers. It kind of, as the story went on, is like, oh, this is that child abuser lady. I don't care if she dies, right? There's bad people. Some of them are good, like the boy's parents. You're like, oh man, how come they had to die? But a lot of them are you're just like, yeah, he deserved it, type thing. So
if you do like those people, and when you see any movie, like really any type of show, but you're like, God, I really hope this guy, this guy or gal gets it in the end. So it does set those up. So and again, Steve. I mean, King is famous for being long-winded and really making characters. So, when no one dies, it's not like, I never knew that person. They're like, who people are. So
and that's good storytelling. I think good character development. So even though it may take a while to get there, when it matters, you appreciate that it happened. So all right, so the boy in the prologue, the boy and the man, they go to the Catholic priest, and the boy tells him what happened, and I guess he had wrote a novel and got it published, so that's where they were funding all their driving around and living different places, right? Was that the same novel that he was working on throughout the book, or is that different?
I honestly
doesn't matter.
Don't remember, but I want to say it might be, because he went there and people were like, "Hey, are you writing about the Marston House? Like, is that why you're here specifically?" And it kind of was, and then I think it all kind of tied together in the end.
Yeah. Well, I know he destroyed it when they were like getting ready to leave. He threw it in the fire or the trash or something. He didn't leave the town with it, but I wonder if he like rewrote it later, now that he was like a type of therapy, like, oh, all these bad things happen.
I could be wrong, but I don't know if it ever says like this was the book he.
It probably doesn't matter. But I think so. They were kind of reading the newspaper clippings of that area, trying to find out if things have died down. And I guess they've found some, and so they decided to go back. They're like, "Oh, we got to go back. We got to finish what we started." So then you're like, "Oh, what did they where did they start?" So then you jump into the story of, it's a flashback. Ben shows up to town for the first time in a long time. He's already a published, successful author. People in the town have read his book. Some people remember him. So he's kind of got this semi-famous notoriety showing up, and some people like him. Some people think he's a loon or whatever word they use, but he ends up staying at a boarding house and starts to get back into the town and get back into society. And get to I don't think he ran into anybody he knew from previously, because he was a teenager, right, when he was there before.
He was young when he left, so. Yeah.
But he ends up striking up a friendship with Susan Norton, who's first I thought she was a high school kid, and I was like, oh, it's kind of weird. But she's old. She's graduated and has a job, I think, and she's looking to move on in the near future. But they meet up, they strike up a relationship, and start to like each other. And then there's another friend, the teacher, Matt.
Yep, Matthew Burke.
Yeah. And he's older than Ben, right? He's like maybe 10, 15 years older, 20 maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact difference, but yes, he's older, because, I mean, and you, not to say young people can have heart attack, but his heart attack puts him in the hospital.
True.
That is a big part of the thing. So I'd have to put him, I'd say in his 60s. And I think in the movies he's old. So.
Oh, okay. All right, so he's that much older than Ben. All right. And then they all hang out at this bar, this local bar, and that's where he meets Matt, I believe, for the first time, and a couple other people in the story. So he's just hanging out, writing his book, writing his novel, getting to know people. But the first thing he does when he comes into town, he goes up to the Marston House, which is up on a hill. Everybody knows where it is. Everybody knows the history. And tell us about the history, what you remember, Jordan, kind of its importance in this novel.
Well, it kind of has, it's one of those houses, one of the quotes from the book when we, each section of the book, he has kind of like a little, I don't know, excerpt from a book or whatever. King chose to use the Shirley Jackson Hill House for the start of the first section of the book. And so it's just kind of one of those houses that just draws evil to it. Mm-hmm. And so there was supposedly a guy that had like hung himself, and part of like a dare, all the kids, because it had notoriety, the house itself, but then they had him go in there and like check it out. Yeah. And so he's like, I think he's either saw like a ghost, or he thought he saw, but like saw the guy.
Yeah, that was a little, I wouldn't say confusing. It was nebulous. Like, did he really see something, or was it like a ghost, like you said, or what?
Yeah, Hubert Marston, the guy. But yeah, it's just kind of one of those, just evil houses that just attracts things.
So Hubie he shot his wife, it turns out, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then he hung himself. Was that related to the current storyline, or is that just something bad that happened earlier?
No, because that didn't have anything to do with like vampires or anything. And then the house was just vacant. There's some speculation that that's what Ben was actually trying to like get, was that house.
Oh yeah, he wanted to buy it. He went to the realtor and he's like, no, someone already bought it.
Yeah, so then they already sold it to is it Straker?
Straker, yeah.
Who, is bringing the vampire over. But yeah, so, it's just been, I think, empty since then. So
okay. And I was wondering, when the story starts out there, he drives up there and you kind of get that flashback from when he went in there as a kid. And I'm like, oh, why would you want to buy that house? Sounds creepy. First of all, the house sounds creepy. Then you have this crazy experience. Why do you want to live there? So I don't know. That was
which leads
odd.
me to believe that that's what the book. And again, I'm not 100% certain on if he ever discloses. Because I think Susan asks him like, "Hey, are you writing about the Marston House?" But I don't know if he was like yes, or we'll see what comes from it. But
yeah.
Why he wanted to stay there is because that's what he was, writing about. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he didn't. I can't remember if he did say, "Yeah, I'm writing about it" or not. But she would ask him. He'd always kind of look at it, or he was looking at it, and she's like, "Are you writing about it?" And he would never say. Maybe he eventually did, but I don't remember that part. But yeah, so it had a pretty good impact on him growing up. Left him scarred emotionally. Sounds like. But yeah, he wanted to buy it and live there, write his novel there. But Straker, so Straker's the enabler of the vampire, right?
Yeah, he's the one that makes all the arrangements. He can be out in public. He's the one that. But
he's a vampire?
No, my understanding is he's not a vampire. He is just the, in traditional vampire sense, he's kind of the, assistant. He's the assistant to the vampire in office terms.
Yeah.
So he's the one that's just in charge of like, hey, I'm going to purchase your house. Hey, I'm bringing you, people. Kind of that notion, it's been a while for the vampire, so it's, he's weak. He needs a human helper to get kind of things rolling. Whether he becomes a vampire or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
then
it's
Barlow is the vampire.
Yeah, Barlow is the vampire. Straker, it says he's the human agent. So
Okay. He's just a bad dude.
yeah. I don't know. I never know if these people are promised like, power or eventually to become a vampire. So that's why they, why they do these things. But
yeah. I don't think they addressed it, but he was able to use the guy's money, right, to buy the house, to buy the store. So he probably had, access to the funds to get what he wanted, whatever he wanted. So that was probably part of the deal too. So they move into the house, and right about the same time Ben Mears does, because it sounds like no one was living there when he went up there initially, and then later they moved in.
Yeah.
And then
it's kind of almost simultaneously that. Because the house was vacant. Ben goes to the, real estate guy and is like, hey, what about the Marston House? And like, oh, someone's buying it. And then now all of a sudden people are seeing, lights on or whatever. People there.
Okay. So then stuff starts happening shortly thereafter. The two kids go missing. Is it Danny and his brother?
Yeah, the Glick
boys. And Danny's the one that is bitten, right? And
I think
Danny's the one that dies.
Ralphie's the one that gets taken. He's and I'm trying to remember, because then I think Danny ends up in the hospital.
That's right.
But Ralphie's the one that is gone.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
As they were coming home, and they were coming home from Mark Petrie's house when that happened.
They were going to go hang out with him.
Yeah.
They got ambushed. So that's the first. Well, there was the incident with the dog, right? Hanging on the gate of the cemetery. Was that before that? Was that the first incident, or did it happen after Danny or Ralphie?
I can't remember.
Yeah. So those two happen pretty close together. And that starts this whole thing going. So they have the funeral for Ralphie, and the one cemetery guy, he's putting dirt on the coffin, right? And he starts to have these thoughts that he's still alive, so he needs to dig him up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he does, and he gets bitten eventually. Was it by Ralphie?
I think so, because then Ralphie goes to his brother, and then they go to Mark, and that's kind of where it all all branches out.
Yeah, so that's the impetus of this whole the kids, right? Go for the kids, and then go for people connected to the kids. And so we don't really see anybody get bit at first, right? It's just this dark presence. Then the one guy has thoughts, and then he opens the coffin. You get this. You don't really see anybody get bit at first. So I was kind of wondering, okay, are these really vampires, or are they just getting killed? And so then it starts to. They start to reappear, and they're like, oh yeah, they're vampires.
Yep.
And I guess it's the traditional bite them on the neck type, drink their blood that does it.
Everything in this is traditional, which is why, as we talk about Mark, who ends up, spoiler alert, he's the boy from the beginning. But the reason he's able to, because all these people are unaware. Like you said, the guy in the cemetery, he hears stuff, and that leads to his demise. They go to see, Ralphie goes to see his brother, and he's like, "Oh, it's my brother who's dead." Now
he's back.
Now he's back alive. Yay! Then their mom, she's like, "Oh my gosh!" She's like, "You're back!" Like the reason Mark was able to refrain from being killed was because he was the kind of weirdo kid that liked all the horror stuff. He loved the monsters and he loved Dracula and stuff.
Yeah.
So he's like, okay, I know what's going on.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
100%. Like, there was no trickery or, hey, yeah, we're the vampires that can do this. Like, everything's to the T. And so he's like, nope, not letting you inside. I'm not doing this. Like, so that's how he was able to.
Yeah. He was able to recognize the threat, knew what to do to defend himself from the threat based on these monster movies and monster books, right?
Yeah. Where everyone else in the town, like, no one watched monster stuff. And so, yeah, it was Mark that was able to. And he, if I'm remembering right, I think he's the one that even went to like Ben and was like, "Hey, this is what's happening because I know vampires. Like this is what it is." And it's, because I think Ben just thought it was evil that was happening. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, at some point, Ben meets up with Matt, the teacher at the bar, and then they start talking about the vampires, right?
And maybe that's who told them about all the. Like I said, I don't remember if it was him and Matt that were discussing or him and Mark. I was Matt and Mark. That's
yeah.
King didn't do us any favors in trying to make the names. You're always like, hey, who's this now again?
Yeah. So, so there, when Mark and or not Mark, Matt and Ben, are talking, they're like, it's either, it's crazy, right? They admit that it's crazy, and they're like, there's no other scenario that this could play out that this could be true. They have to be vampires, even as crazy as that sounds. That's what it is, and they're willing to be wrong. Like, okay, if we're wrong, we're wrong. Great. Now, we don't want that to happen anyway. But if we're right, we got to look into this. And so, and then eventually, Jimmy. So how did Matt end up in the hospital? He had the heart attack in the first place, right?
Yeah, had a heart attack. Yep.
Was it him? No, him and Susan were at his house. And they went upstairs, or he went upstairs. They heard something. He went upstairs, and that's when he saw the one guy who had been bitten.
Yeah,
Mike.
Mike. Because they saw him at the bar, and so you got Mike, Mark, Matt.
Yeah.
So they see him at the bar, and they're like, "Hey, you're not doing too good. You come stay with me." And then I think
that's right. After he got bit, but not turned.
Yeah, and I think in that struggle, that's what caused him to have a heart attack, and like fear too of like, this is a vampire, and I think that's what kind of clued him in. So,
yeah. So then he ends up, what's his name? We were just talking, Mike, the gravedigger. He ends up dying in Matt's bed, right?
Yes.
And then the doctor, so they call the doctor, Jimmy. And then that's when he's like, oh, okay, they do the exam, they see that he's dead, and they take him at that point, right?
And I think he actually, he was in the bed, and I think he got attacked by a vampire while in the bed, which caused him to die, if you will, and then he came back to like, it's all, I think that's what happened. Then he came back, and everyone was like, you were dead, and now you're here, you come back again, so.
Yeah. So then he goes to the hospital. Susan finds the ring with the initials MR. I think there's a middle initial. But so then she's like, oh.
And that was. Yeah.
So that's what kind of convinces her, like, okay. Because she didn't want to disbelieve Matt, but she, in the same vein, is like, there's no way this is true. But then she finds the ring, and they see that the window had been open and there's no footprints. It's a second level room. So they're like, oh, it's crazy. This is it. This is true. So that's when they start to believe. Susan and Susan and Matt and Ben.
Yep.
And somehow Mark gets roped in. I think he's had his experience. He figures it out.
With the click boys.
Mm-hmm. And
Boy.
yeah. And then Father Callahan gets brought into it as well, right?
Yes.
So it's basically those guys that are like, they're the heroes or the group that's going to stop all this.
Yep.
So that whole process took a while, right? That was a good portion of the book, but it was interesting how that all plays out. So due to Matt being in bed, and then at some point, Susan's old boyfriend attacks Ben, and he has to go to the hospital too. So Ben
that was more of a jealousy attack.
Mm-hmm. But I think he had been bit at that time because he was looking all pale and sweaty and stuff too, right?
He was having to cover himself up. And he was wearing like a shower cap. Like, all dressed weird.
Yeah.
To go out and during the day.
Yeah. So, but he hadn't necessarily turned, but he was jealous, like you said. Had they had words before, or they'd seen each other or something?
Yeah.
So he shows up, attacks Ben. Ben's in the hospital with Matt, and Susan's there too. And that's when they start really trying to pin things down. And they bring in Jimmy, who's Matt's doctor. They kind of tell him about things, and because they ask him, well, when you examine this one body, how did it look, right? And so then they start, and then eventually Ben and Jimmy go re-examine this other lady who he didn't get to examine because she was Jewish or something, and went to another mortuary and was examined there. So they go to that mortuary, ask the doctor there, the mortician there, hey, can we look at her? So he does them a favor. They go down there, and I think was that the child abuser, or was that someone else? Do you remember?
I don't remember who.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Who that one was? It might have.
No, I don't think it was actually.
Kids.
But while they're there, examiner, she rises from the dead. They have to fight her off. And does Jimmy get bit? Yeah, he gets bit.
Yeah, because that's when he goes, because they keep slowly losing people that believe him and can actually.
But they were able to like suck out the poison, basically, right? Yeah. With him this time, and they put some bleach on it or some chemical to kind of neutralize it, and so they're able to prevent, because he had been bit, and then a couple minutes later they, what's his name, Ben was able to do something like suck it out or get rid of the poison. So, so then they know for sure. The doctor who's the science guy, he knows for sure. Like this is crazy. This is what's going on. So, and from here it just gets worse, right? You have those chapters that we talked about before about all the townspeople, and people are just letting the vampires in, getting bit. So the vampire horde is growing. So at this point, what were you thinking? Like, how is this going to get resolved?
Well, and again, that it doesn't go great because, again, going back to the opening, there's just two of them two of them left, and their actions the whole time, it didn't go great. They're still terrified, they're kind of in shock and whatever, and so all this is happening, and you've had this kind of setup of this whole first part of the book is also kind of a romance novel. You've got Ben and Susan. It's a love story mixed in with a vampire story.
Yeah.
But she's probably not going to make it because she's obviously now in love with Ben, and they're together, and she's not around in the beginning of the book, so it's just kind of and I kind of, like I said, I kind of like those things sometimes because I like being like, okay, let's see how this all goes down. So
yeah, I did think that. Like, oh, Susan, where is she? Did she make it or not? I didn't think she was going to get her the fate that she gets. I thought something else had happened. Maybe they had split up, went different ways or something. So, but yeah, that's kind of the next part is Susan decides to go off on her own to look at, because they had this plan that they were going to go up to the house, the Marston House, and just attack him there.
Yeah.
And since Ben and Jimmy were taking too long because they were dealing with this other vampire lady, she decides to go on her own. So she drives up there. She ends up running into Mark. And I think, is this when he kind of is brought into the group?
I think so. I think she and Mark meets. Mark is like, yeah. Now I'm remembering because Mark is like, hey, there's like,
yeah, don't go in there.
Right? And she's like, oh yeah, we know.
Yeah,
we know. He was kind of doing his own. Like he didn't know
mm-hmm.
that. Yeah, that's right. He didn't know other people knew what was going on, and he knew from just his
experiences,
nerdiness of horror. Ben and Jimmy and all them from we've seen this stuff, and this was when now they all clash together. So yeah. So Mark and Susan, this is one of those when you're watching the horror movie and like, oh, let's go in the basement, there's a scary noise. You're like, no, don't do it. This is that kind of moment. We're like, no, don't go in the house. If you're going in, you got to take like 10 people and guns and stakes and all the stuff to get rid of the bad guys. But they decide to do it anyway, and they break in the house, right, the window or the door or something. And they go in, they're looking around. Susan, she goes in the basement by herself, right? Yes.
And Mark goes upstairs by himself, so they split up, which is another dumb thing. But I think this book was written before all those scary movies, right? Because it was like 75.
This maybe the precursor to the horror the rules of horror, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How the characters act during horror stuff.
Yeah. So, and then Mark runs into Straker, and he gets tied up, right? And he's going to come back. He ties him up so he can go deal with Susan, and then when it gets dark, the Barlow is going to come get him.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So Straker leaves, and he's like, oh, I got to get out. So he eventually escapes, or is able to get free from his bonds, but then that's right when Straker comes back, so he hits him with a chair leg or a bedpost or some club. And is that when he dies, or does he just get knocked out? I can't remember.
With Straker?
Yeah.
I
think he gets knocked out, but he's all bloody and stuff. So
yeah, he does die there. Yep, he is killed by Mark.
Okay.
Yep.
So he does that and then runs down there, but it's too late for Susan, right? She's been turned. She's been bit because by that time it was being dark or close to dusk. So Barlow wakes up and takes her. So he runs back. He runs out, goes and finds the group, and they start to plan. And that's when Ben's like, well, or Ben's told, it's like, you got to kill Susan, right? You're the one, because of their connection, you're the one that has to do it. Stake through the heart. And this was when we start hearing about the stakes through the heart, the garlic, the crosses. And I think that's when they bring in Callahan.
The priest.
The priest.
Yep. And this looked kind of like what you said too, when they were saying they're like, we got to do this. And I think they had that discussion like, well, like if we're wrong and if they're not vampires, like we're just going to be like straight up murdering people.
Killing people, yeah.
You know, if they're not really vampires. And that was kind of their like, hey, yeah, we know what we're doing. Like, because, you know, they were kind of having to elude the law a little bit to killing off the townsfolk themselves that had turned. So.
Yeah, and they get the holy water from Father Callahan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised how much religion and faith took a role in this book. You know, Father Callahan had faith that the cross would work and the holy water would work, and so did these people, but they weren't necessarily religious, these others, but they had faith in that these symbols would work, right?
Yeah, and that is kind of a big part in this, and you know, kind of interesting from a, you know, writer who's not known for, you know, faith-based works, if you will. Yeah. But again, it kind of goes back to the, you know, traditional vampire. Yeah. You know, it's not, you know, because some vampire books you get, and it's like, you know, oh, the science behind things. Like, this is why garlic works. This is why it's all, you know, they can't see themselves in the mirror because they're molecules. Like, they, you know, you see those science stuff. This is just straight up like, we bless this holy water. Yeah. Christ is going to get them. Like, that's the science behind it. So there's not a lot of, you know, scientific fact other than just, hey, have faith. You know, the cross will work. The holy water will work. Bring a Bible with you. Like, there you go. That's how you kill vampires. Yeah.
And it's so cliche, but back then it wasn't, and when he wrote it. But it's so cliche that I thought they would show up, they'd do the holy water thing, they'd show them the cross, and it wouldn't do anything. They're like, oh, well, that didn't work. Dang it. Now they're dead. So, but I was surprised to see that it worked. But I guess, like, well, what if it didn't work? You know, what's the recourse? Because you can't shoot them, right?
No, I mean it's strictly the stake through the heart is the, you know, the next one. I want to see. You know, let's see the other famous vampire book. I'm trying to see when it came out. Oh, Interview with the Vampire had come out prior to this, so I mean that's kind of when you have the starts. But yeah, it was all the classic vampire.
The stuff that was introduced in Dracula.
Yeah, yep. I mean, and that's, you know, a little, you know, backstory. That, I mean, that's what he wanted to do. King just wanted a modern Dracula. He's, you know, and he's from New England, and it happened in a New England town, and that's kind of the whole, you know, I'm one for, I like seeing reimagined of the classics because, you know, I want my kid to read Dracula and he's like, this book is lame. Like, you know, language in it's weird and everything. And so, you know, that's kind of what this was. It's just a modern Dracula. I mean, you know, the stories fit pretty, and that's what he wanted to do also. That's, you know, it wasn't like by happenstance. He set out to do that, just that. So. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, you don't really have to explain things, right? It's just a matter of we already grew up with this knowledge from the movies or just watching TV and various other vampire shows. So it's already in place. It's just, okay, this is who it is. There's no weird, strange thing. It's just the normal vampire stuff, which is good. So they get the stuff, the religious artifacts to help them, and they end up going up to the Marston House, killing Susan. Ben does it. He's traumatized by it. It's hard, rightfully so. And then they go to. They end up at Mark's house, and his parents are there.
Because I think Barlow, for kind of vengeance because Mark killed Schrager. your parents are gonna get it, like
Yeah.
because they kind of were pinning him down, and it was kind of one of those things. And so he gets out, and that's where he was to Mark's house. So.
Yeah. Yeah, so and it ends up being Callahan and Mark that go there, right, to talk to the parents. And they get there, nothing's wrong. They tell them, hey, this is what's happening in the town. The parents are like, what kind of crap are you feeding our kid? And you actually killed someone, and our son was there. What are you guys doing? You're crazy. We want you out of the house. And then the lights go out. They're like, oh no, it's about to hit the fan. And the lights come back on, or something happens, and he's in there. Barlow's in there. And he kills Mark's parents in front of him, slams their heads together, so they didn't get bit necessarily. So they are spared that horror. Yeah. And this is where we get the confrontation, I think, is pretty important between Father Callahan, and Barlow. And this is where, faith is such a big deal. But Barlow, he's got those words, he's able to use his tongue to convince Father Callahan that he's not as faithful as he thinks he is. So then he's holding the cross in front of him, and it's shining bright and preventing Barlow from getting to him. But as he talks to him and kind of sows the seeds of doubt into Father Callahan, the light starts to decrease, and the cross is eventually broken. Right, so then Father Callahan is doomed, and then do you remember this part? He doesn't bite Callahan; he makes Callahan bite him. Is that and suck his blood? I think that's what happened. So there's already a wound there.
Barlow takes some of Callahan's blood, which then kind of. I don't really know the true significance, like almost an act of dominance, if you will.
Okay. But does Callahan turn into a vampire?
I would say probably not. I would say it's not ever explicitly said. He just takes off. Callahan runs away. He's
defeated.
And we don't hear from him for the rest of the book.
Yeah. Well, he tries to go to the church, right? And he gets shocked, pushed. He can't enter the holy place anymore. And so he gets on a bus and leaves. And then there's a scene where he's like talking to the bus driver, hey, go get me a sandwich or something. I don't know. It was kind of weird. But yeah, he goes on the bus and we don't hear from him again. But I didn't get the sense that he was a vampire, that he was like, he wasn't himself. Maybe he hadn't turned yet. I don't know. He's kind of in that middle place where he's not the same person, but he's not necessarily a vampire.
Yeah, we do, in part of the ongoing King universe, many years later, run into Father Callahan.
Okay.
And he's not a vampire, so I don't know if it's kind of, as we talk modern vampire stuff, like there's the movie Underworld, and they've got some people that are like a little bit vampire, but not like all the way I don't know, he might be something like that because of what happened with Barlow, but he is, he's kind of, his life mission is to rid the world of vampires, so he kind of becomes a vampire hunter.
Oh, okay. Van Helsing, huh?
Yeah, he kind of, and so he ends up becoming a main character. Well, not main character, but a decently significant character in the Dark Tower. That's where they end up people finding him again. So
okay. Does he have any special abilities, like a vampire or anything?
Not that I can recall, and I've only read the Dark Tower ever one time straight through, so my knowledge on that's not super great, but I think he's just like I ran away from evil once and not gonna let it happen again. And
Okay.
so he's just in the fight against evil then. So.
All right. Good. So he survives, and he decides to make some changes instead of running. That's good. I like it. Cool. So he's gone. He's out of the picture. So it's just Mark and Ben and Jimmy and then Matt. But Matt ends up getting a heart attack again at some point in the hospital. So once he goes to the hospital, he doesn't leave, right? He's just there kind of directing things. He does all the homework and tells people what to do.
Yep. And then that second heart attack gets him.
Yeah. So he ends up dying at some point later, towards the end of the book.
Yep.
And so then Jimmy, he can't leave. So Jimmy and Matt and Mark decide we got to find Barlow. He's not at the house anymore. They go back. He's not there. So we got to find him, kill him. We got to get rid of him because this is, before long, the whole town's going to be vampires, and then it's just going to spread from there, and we'll be doomed. So they finally figure out where he's hiding, and it's actually in the place where Ben was staying. He was the boarding house he was at. So they go to make a bunch of stakes, and Ben's like, okay, I'll do this. You kind of mark houses where people are vampires, and we'll get to them later. But then when they separate, Mark and Matt, that's when they figure out where Barlow's at. So they decide just to go there instead of waiting, because the plan was to wait till the next day. They're like, well, we don't want to wait another night. So they go there, and it doesn't turn out too good for them. So we find that the lady who runs the boarding house, I kind of liked her. She was we get her viewpoint, or at least she's involved in the story enough that you're rooting for her to survive a little. At least I was, but she doesn't make it. And they find that he's down in the basement, so they open the door to go down there, and Jimmy, they had cut the stairs and put like a bunch of knives on the bottom as a trap. So Jimmy, it's dark, he just kind of steps off like you normally would to go downstairs, and there's no stairs. He falls, lands on the knives, and is killed. Yeah. What'd you think of that death?
Yeah, that one I remember that's one of the ones that I like. It's just burned in your brain almost. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's one of the heroes, right? So, you're like, what? No way.
Yep.
Then it was he's just laying there. He didn't die instantly. He's just laying there, and he tells the kid to leave, right? Because he had something, didn't he? I think they had to come back for, I can't remember, the flashlight. So, but yeah, the kid leaves, gets in the car, drives the car for the first time back to Ben, and then I think they decide, do they stay the night, or they decide to go back that day?
I am not.
Yeah, I can't remember.
100% sure. When they confront him. So
yeah, I think maybe they do go back right then. No, they don't. They go back the next day, and actually, I don't remember. Anyway, they go back eventually, and as they have to find out where he is. He's like hidden way back in this tunnel underneath the cellar and all this stuff. So they eventually pull him out, and just as they're getting ready to stake him, he wakes up, and there's this big fight, but Ben is able to do it and kill him. But I was expecting all the other vampires to die, because he's, like you said, patient zero. But that didn't happen.
No, they're still around.
Yeah. And so they decide to leave at that point, right? They're like, we're out of here.
Well, and they got... I don't know if they thought, as you did, hey, we've done it. Like, this is this is it. I think they went through and got a significant portion, but I don't know if they knew quite that there was more people, because that's when they kind of got the newspaper clippings of like, you know, hey, things are going on here. So
yeah. So they eventually leave, but leave a lot of vampires behind. And this part was weird to me. I think it's because of our modern world, right? If something like this were to happen now, it'd be all over social media, it'd be in the news, and people wouldn't just be like, oh, this town's kind of quiet. We'll just keep on driving down the road. We don't want to stop here. You know, oh, we haven't seen these guys in months. Oh, well, they must be doing their own thing. No big deal, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we haven't heard from the cops from this town, or no one's going to school. Oh, well, you know. So I think that my modern day experiences are shading that. But I do remember, you know, I grew up in the 70s and 80s where we didn't have cell phones. It's kind of like, you know, when you're watching the X-Files and you're like, oh, if they had a cell phone, they could solve this mystery real quick. They just take a picture of the alien and they'd be good. So it's kind of like that, where if they just had the modern communication that we did, or, you know, internet, this wouldn't be a story.
Yeah.
Or it'd be a completely different story, I guess I should say. So, yeah, they just leave, and then they were back to the prologue timeline, and they decided to come back. And it's been about a year since Ben rolled into town. It's been about a year later that they come back, and nothing's really changed, right? The vampires are still living. There's no live humans, right? It's just vampires.
Mm-hmm.
So I was expecting that. Go ahead.
I don't remember too. I mean, do they burn down the house?
Yeah. So they come back, and that's what they do. They're like, we got to burn it down, because throughout the beginning of the story, they talk about this big fire. So they're like, oh, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start a fire where the same place this other one started, and the wind will just burn it, you know, carry the fire and burn the whole town down.
Yeah.
So they do that, and I think that's the end. And I think they were going to go back and try and kill some more, because it doesn't burn. I don't think it burns down the whole town, but anyways, so that's their solution. And then that's the end of the story.
Yep.
So, I didn't like that solution. I didn't think it was thorough enough. Let's burn it down. 'Cause I was thinking, well, aren't these vampires going to go out and feed in the next town over? Or someone drives through and they attack the person who stops for gas or goes to the restaurant. You know? What do you think?
So one of the interesting things is there's a short story. King writes a lot of short stories.
Okay.
And so there's a short story. I want to say it's called One for the Road. And it takes place after, and it kind of deals with that. Like this guy stumbles into this bar and is like my car broke down, and and they're like, these guys from the bar, they're like, hey, let's go find your family or whatever, and they pull in. He's like, we went this way, and it's like Salem's Lot. And they're like, no. Like,
not going there.
Like, sorry, dude. It's over, and that's so it kind of builds that lore of like, and so oddly enough, though, the vampires just kind of are like, this is our town. Yeah, maybe we just survive off of stragglers. There also is a really awful movie. It's one of those famous, I don't know if we've discussed this before. I think we did when we talked about Carrie. Again, people making just a awful vampire movie, and they're like, no one is going to watch this. What are we going to do? And they're like, I know, let's just call it Return to Salem.
Okay, yeah. I think you brought that up, but yeah.
They got me. I paid $5. I own that movie now. It is Tara Reid. It was her, I think, acting debut maybe in it.
Mm-hmm.
But the like there's a school, and the school only goes at nighttime, and this outsider just ventures into this town. Him and his like estranged son. I don't know why they like it doesn't make any sense because again, it doesn't have anything to do with like Salem's Lot for other than the name is Salem's Lot just to get people like interested in the movie. So I don't know why this guy goes to this town to stay, but then he falls in love and there's vampires everywhere, and so that does kind of what it's just they just have their own town, and they just actually yeah, because he's like a movie person and he's like interviewing some of the vampires and they just want to be left alone and share their way. Like it's bizarre, but that's so King had nothing to do with that, but in his short story it's just the vampires are just kind of taken over the area, and it's just all the people that live around the area are like, hey, don't go don't go through Salem's Lot, like take the long way, and if you go through Salem's Lot you're toast. So that's kind of what it is.
Now that I think about it as you're talking, I think that was the reason why they were reading the newspaper clippings to see if they were still active. So I think that's how but with as many vampires as there should have been a lot more missing people and animals, but there was some that were going missing, so they're like, oh, it's still going on, we got to go back. But I think maybe they don't need that much sustenance because it's not necessarily that they're hungry, is it? It's just they want to turn the other people that they know.
Yeah, it's just them. Yeah, to kind of eliminate threats almost.
Yeah.
If you will. So.
Yeah, so it's not like they're starving for blood and they need to go out and feed like some of the movies are, like zombies and stuff. So it sounds like it's just, if this guy's here, we'll attack him and turn him into one of us. But if not, we're fine. So that's what it seems to be. All right. So you talked about the movie, the awful sequel, the unofficial sequel. We had also mentioned that they were filming a Salem's Lot movie, like a new one. And I looked into it a little bit, and it was by James Wan.
Yes, it's actually the first, because the first two movies, one came out right after the book on, it was like CBS, again, made for TV movie. Yeah. And then Rob Lowe was in one that was on TNT back in like 2004. So it has two made for TV movies, never an actual feature film, other than the awful sequel. But yeah.
Okay.
No, who knows when it's coming out?
Well, I saw that it was supposed to come out last fall, and I think that's when we first talked about it.
Yeah.
And then they pushed it back to April. But I haven't seen anything about it.
No, supposedly it's done.
Yeah.
One of the worries was, there was, the thing, the last couple months where just studios were just scrapping movies, like, hey, it's done, but if we never release it, we can write it off as a total loss.
Like
so
the Batgirl thing.
Worried that, so people were kind of, there is that worry that they might just be like, it's not coming out on theaters, so no one knows what's happening with it yet, but I'm hoping it's always been one of my favorite Stephen King stories, again, just because it's just the classic, I think it's probably his only one other than like Ghosts, but I mean, this is the classic like monster movie, and I really do like his version of the vampire story, so I want to see a good movie done of it. So
yeah. Well, you think with James Wan on board, he's a horror director. He also did the Aquaman movies, right? So he's got some clout. He's got some experience. You think it'd be good. Wonder what happened with that.
I'm still optimistic that I'll get to see it. So
yeah, hopefully. All right, and you mentioned there's a short story, so I think I need to read that.
Yeah, multiple. So there's the one for the road, which is the sequel, And then there is
that a like full on novel or just a short story?
No, it's just a short story.
Okay.
I'm not sure what collection it's in. I don't know what collection it's in. There is a prequel called Jerusalem's Lot, which was the second title of Salem's Lot. It was initially called Second Coming. They scrapped that title. Then they went Jerusalem's Lot, and then they thought that was too religious, and so they scrapped that and went with Salem's Lot. But then he has a short story called Jerusalem's Lot, which that one is really interesting because that takes place in like the 1700s, and it's kind of about the settlement of, and it deals more with like the occult, kind of like this ancient being that lives in the town, and that's where the evil comes from. They did a really good series on epics called Chapelwaite that Adrian Brody was in, and so that one was really good. And that
was based on Jerusalem's Lot?
Based on Jerusalem's Lot, so nothing to do with like Salem's Lot. The vampires in it they're vampires. It's more a primitive type of vampire, but I mean it's really good, especially if you like the kind of 1700s style stuff. Very creepy. So that was really good. So that deals with the beginning of the town. So yeah.
So it's kind of a magnet for evil.
Yes.
This town is.
So.
And I think maybe I'm remembering wrong, but wasn't there something bad before Hubie Marston? Like another evil? Or is that I'm just misremembering?
And I'm not sure if they talk about it with the house, and they might even allude to a little bit of that stuff with because with this Jerusalem's Lot story, there's this book of, and they call it the Worm, and it's this just evil ancient being thing that this kind of cult religion's trying to summon up. And so they might allude to that in the book. I'm not 100% sure. I get them all mixed up on where they talk, but
okay. Well, I'll have to read those two short stories, and then maybe we can do like a quick follow-up.
Yeah, short stories are really, really good. The Jerusalem's Lot one is told like letters back and forth. So it's pretty interesting. And the show is one of my favorite Stephen King works. And it was interesting. They called it Chapelwaite. That's like the estate the guy lives in, but I think they did that to differentiate from just Salem's Lot. And but
okay.
Really, really good though.
How long is that show? It's
like a 1 hour an episode and 10 episodes, so it's a 10-hour thing. Okay. So
check that out.
I mean, the short story is like 30 pages, so it just and the short story is literally just this guy writing letters and slowly going crazy because he's and so they there's a whole lot in the show that's not in the book, so it's pretty interesting. So
okay, all right. Well, so that's Salem's Lot. Anything else you want to add for this episode?
Oh no, it's one of my favorites. I guess one little tidbit: he had two books that were ready to go after he wrote Carrie, and one was more of a, I don't want to say thriller. It later came out as a Bachman book about a guy who people are widening a road and they're going to take over his house, and he's like, no, you're not. And he shoots them all and stuff like that. And they had that, or they had this Salem's Lot. And so the guy's like, well, if you come out with Salem's Lot, you're going to be typecast as a horror writer. So, and he's like, all right, let's do it. So
Okay.
That's what came out. So yeah, that's kind of that was really the start. Because I mean, Carrie, you know, horror book, but I think it takes that second one to just really make you the, you know, horror writer. So this was kind of the start. So
okay,
yeah,
cool. Yeah, I liked it too. I'd probably give it a 8, 7.5, 8.
Yeah.
Out of 10. So what's next in the chronological timeline?
What's next is the book that got me into Stephen King, my all-time favorite, The Shining.
Shining. Okay.
You cannot get, I don't think, much better than that. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, that's what's up next. So yeah, that's a good one.
All right. Well, I'll get reading on that one. Hopefully it won't take 3 months.
No, that one's a pretty quick, I mean, in my opinion, a pretty quick read. So
yeah, my problem with this one is I just got sidetracked with like 5 other books before I finished this one. So
yeah, when you have the shelf of things you're trying to get through.
Yeah. I got a pile of TBR. So
that's like with me. I'm like, oh man, do I really want to read 70 books again?
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, that's what's next. The Shining. So
cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening, watching the podcast, the Stephen King podcast. Like we said, we'll be doing The Shining next. So read that book, or if you've already read it, tune in next time for the next episode. But we'll get started on that. At least I will. It sounds like Jordan has already read it a few times, so he's good. Maybe I'll watch the movie too, and then we can compare. I haven't seen it for a while, since I was, 20 years ago. But
despite what people say, it's a good movie. I like the movie, so
yeah. So we'll watch it and talk about, because this one's better than Cujo, right? As far as the production quality.
Yeah, this is Stanley Kubrick did it. This is a good movie. So
yeah. Okay, so we'll do that. Talk about the book and the movie, how they compare, how they differentiate, how they're different, and which is better maybe. So, but yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps us out. We appreciate your time, and we'll catch you next time.